we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's September 14th here in Seoul. I'm Shin, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainhong.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. And Nal Song.
Hi.
Hi. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Every October 31st, also known as Halloween, thousands of partygoers hit the streets around Japan's capital, Tokyo, specifically near the Shibuya crossing, which becomes so crowded that it's difficult for officials to control. That's why the mayor of this ward has prohibited drinking or any Halloween events from happening. He also asked people not to come near Shibuya Station for Halloween this year, adding on how he'd not like to see an accident like the Itaewon Crush tragedy in Korea that killed hundreds. Elon Musk, the co-founder of Tesla and the owner of X, formerly known as Twitter, has frequently mentioned how he was afraid the dwindling global population could lead the world into a doomsday. As a way to boost birth rates, he has actively advocated donating sperm, and The Insider recently reported how Musk even donated sperm to his longtime friend and manager at his own biotech startup Neuralink. The recipient, Siobhan Zillis, said Musk encouraged her to have kids, citing declining birth rates. Zillis used Musk's donated sperm to have twins through IVF back in 2021, which was kept a secret. And China's years-long preference for sons is creating a demographic problem. Recent studies show that around 30 million men in China are involuntarily single or simply can't find a spouse. From 1982 onwards, China had a much higher ratio of male babies than females. Compared to 100 women, a total of 108.5 men were born that year, and that was considered what's considered standard at 107. By the year 2004, this figure already reached as high as 121.2. So simply put, from 1980 to 2021, China saw around 35 million more men born compared to women, and analysts are worried that this can lead to an increase in marriage expenses and unstable retirement life. And this all comes down to a growing single population. What's worse is that China's birth rate is falling as well. The number of births last year was 9.56 million, and for the first time since the CCP was established 73 years ago, the country saw its number of births fall below 10 million. So now I'd like to ask our panelists here in the studio, what was your initial reaction once you heard this news story?
I guess my first reaction was, so many women these days are choosing not to have kids, let alone get married. So obviously this is going to take a big hit on their population in the long run. And it's kind of ironic because a lot of people are saying in Korea nowadays that having a girl is golden because, girls are good to the parents. Not to say that any gender should be any way, but,
right.
We tend to call more often, say nicer things, a little more sweet. But I think because of the tradition, it's just, people preferring sons. But I think it's time to move on a little bit from that and have a good balance.
Yeah. Right. This is the long-term effect from their population policy at the time, which did have a preference over sons. And though it's a grave matter, talking about demographic crises, it's a huge matter because it's not only going to affect the economy, but also society as well. But a lighter note to this, I saw some of the comments in the comment sections related to this article, and some said, if you don't have a man and if you're looking to date, go to China. There's 30 million Chinese men available.
That's true.
Exactly. There's a positive light to it. What do you think about this, Cheska?
Actually, the figure that you reported on, I was quite surprised. I didn't know the discrepancy between gender proportion was this high. And out of the three newsfeed that we covered today, two of them were talking about the low fertility rate and the ways to sort of manage this. And I'm no anthropologist, but even here in News Generation, we've covered several topics related to, low fertility rate, like our generation refusing or choosing not to get married. And, I think instead of encouraging people or forcing people to get married as this is a very private issue. I think there definitely needs to be more system in place for elderlies who are going to be single or even single families that are probably wanting to have their own family without a spouse.
Exactly. You mentioned a great point. South Korea is having its own demographic crisis as well. So maybe if we can see some cooperation on the global front and see governments talk to each other about how they could handle this population crisis, it would come to our benefit. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's now head into our main discussion now. As it's a Thursday, it means it's time for another episode on NewsGen on the environment. And today we're going to be talking about an environmental movement revolving around sustainable, delicious, and cruelty-free options. Take a look at the screen to find out more. Imagine biting into a burger that's not only juicy and full of flavor, but also made entirely from plants. These alternatives are not only good for our health, but also for the planet we call home. Studies have shown that producing alternative meats can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, water usage, and land footprint compared to traditional livestock agriculture. That's why we're seeing more of it, along with the growing vegan and animal rights conscious young people around the world. With more people concerned about animal rights and the environment, alternative meat has become a popular option. From meatballs to sausages, the options are as diverse as your taste buds. And here in the studio, have you guys tried alternative meat before?
I absolutely have, and I can say I'm probably one of the forerunners of alternative meat prototypes, I would say, because I lived in the United States when it was just sort of that boom of alternative meat was coming up. I even tried a protein bar made of bugs.
A protein bar made out of bugs?
Yes, they would grind the bugs, and it was a class, and
I'm sorry, did you know that they were bugs?
Like, I did.
You voluntarily had that?
I mean, I wasn't forced to, but
Am I allowed to cry on air?
The class was actually on sustainability and food consumption. Perfect topic for this topic. But they actually brought in different types of alternative protein sources.
Right.
And one of them was actually ground bugs. But that's not.
Did it taste good?
It actually tasted quite delicious. Yeah. You couldn't tell, but you knew that.
I think it's not even about the taste. Just I think just thinking about a bar of bugs, that's kind of what shocked me. It's shocking.
But the thing is, it wasn't like a bar of like ants embedded in it. It was completely just
you
like
grinded it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, that makes it a little better.
The aesthetic was perfect. But on top of the bugs, I tried tempeh, seitan, and a lot of tofu-based patties. And to me, I'm a big fan of alternative meat industry and products. And these days, I mean, I try different restaurants. I have a lot of vegan friends, so we experiment a lot. We love exploring options. And you know, now they have these like meat patties that taste just as good as like any type of meat that you can possibly imagine. Yeah.
All right, so Cheska is a big fan of alternative meat, including these bug bars.
Protein sources, yes.
What about you now?
So from my reaction, you can tell that I'm a newbie here. I had actually never tried alternative meat until last weekend, but I brought some footage for you guys to see.
Awesome.
I went to go try some vegan chicken. So after work, you want your beer and chicken. So I'm headed to the chicken place, and it's actually made of wheat. So like what Cheska was talking about, it's seitan. And this particular one has zero cholesterol. Yeah, it looks as good as
looks really good.
It just looks like chicken.
Good. Yeah, that texture, the chicken texture was also there. It kind of, yes. As you can tell from my reaction there, I'm very I'm excited about this. And you add your Korean side dish of the radish, pickled radish, and it was delicious.
It looks really good.
It kind of tasted like a nugget almost because that meatiness is not there. But I mean, honestly, anything fried is great, right?
That is true. That is very true.
I mean, it's zero cholesterol, so it's good for your health, and I thought it would be a good alternative meat. And it was my entry level into the alternative meat land before I get to
And you mentioned it tastes like a chicken nugget, right?
Yeah, like the fast food chicken nugget where it's kind of ground up, so you can't really tell that it's, you know, there's the meat part, but it kind of tasted like that.
So is it made out of beans then?
Oh no, it's actually made of wheat. So seitan, they wash out the gluten, and then they make the protein from that, and they fry that.
That's quite fascinating because we're now seeing more dishes made out of alternative meat, as you just mentioned, that could include chicken. Really hard to imagine. But could you guys tell us more about this growing market? Especially, I know that other parts of the world has been leading this trend. So tell us more about how it's like across outside of Korea.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, I grew up in the States, so I kind of saw this movement coming. But according to EY research, there's a growing and continuing demand for alternative meat industry, with market size estimated, get this, at almost 13 billion USD in 2022. Now that figure is expected to have a compound annual growth rate of almost 45% in the next 7 years. Now, as I mentioned, growing up in the States, I definitely saw the movement that began, and now it has almost become mainstream. You know, and I was pleasantly surprised to see fast food chains like McDonald's and Mum's Touch here in Korea, which is one of my favorite burger places, having these miracle burgers and impossible patties that almost taste just as good as many meat patties if you're not too particular. And also, as Niall will share with us, you know, domestic companies like Organica, which is one of my favorite, launched a variety of food lines such as dumplings, you know, even tteokbokki that uses vegan meat, and of course I mentioned like Hamburg steak and patties that were muy delicioso.
So Cheska, so you've tried a lot of different alternatives, not only here in Korea but abroad. But Nell, it was your first time trying it, right? So does it taste similar to actual chicken? Would you think it's an actual substitute?
So I think I would eat it because health benefits, right? It's you know, zero cholesterol. It doesn't have that same texture as maybe a chicken leg where you're ripping it off, but it does taste kind of similar to a chicken nugget, like we were mentioning from McDonald's. They have those chicken nuggets. It kind of tastes like that.
And I think a lot of people from our generation, it starts with that one friend. This one friend like goes to this vegan restaurant and they're like, hey, it actually tastes quite good.
That friend is actually Cheska for me.
It was Cheska, right?
Yes.
And then you went to that chicken place, and now that you tried it out, you are telling friends like myself, you
yeah, you should try it out at least once. Yeah.
See this cycle? We start here and then it's kind of
It makes the full circle.
It's growing and growing. That's the point I would exactly like to point out. It's that the fact that the alternative meat market seems to be growing in Korea as well, right?
Yeah, and Cheska was mentioning how domestic market is growing as well. And I actually saw, as Chuseok is coming up, we like to give gifts in baskets or in boxes, and it comes with spam or different types of meat and oil. And there's a vegan version, so a vegan version of that ham. You can actually see that. I wouldn't mind getting that for Chuseok. So if any of you guys want to send me a gift with vegan Chuseok package, that would be great. There's even vegan mandu dumplings, and you know, you can easily buy bean meat online. It will come to your house the next day. And yeah, there's many different options that you guys can go to find alternative meat.
Right, and I think leading this trend of a growing alternative meat market here in Korea is actually young people like ourselves. But why do you think our generation in particular is leading this type of trend?
I mean, definitely one of the interesting things that I found when I was doing research on this topic is how our generation thought about the alternative meat industry. So if we take a look at the screen, we can see people's thoughts on alternative meat. Now, I was pleasantly surprised that almost 70% of people were actually very positive towards the idea. And this is a survey of about 1,000 people in 20s and 30s, so our generation. And about 15% of people actually said they want to consume the alternative meat. Now, the interesting portion of that was people actually also commented they didn't understand exactly what alternative meat was, and I think that's also a valid point, meaning that we need more, you know, maybe media sources and education on what exactly we're consuming when we eat alternative meat to sort of bridge the gap.
Exactly, that's a very good point, because there's so many vegan restaurants in Seoul, and when I take my friends or family with them, they don't understand how this cannot be meat. They're like, it tastes exactly the same. Sometimes it even tastes better. And that's why I really appreciate when cafes or restaurants write down how this is made. I think that's for good educational purposes as well. Now, would you like to add on why our generation is leading this trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think the environment is a huge reason why a lot of people join in, and maybe for animal rights as well. But I think personally for me, it started with, oh, I want to eat healthier and maybe a little bit lighter. And it's important that we take in our proteins, but, you know, nowadays, I think we're a little bit of a protein overload, especially with meat. Every single meal, there's some sort of meat, and I just wanted to cut back down on that a little bit. And I'm really interested, as there's many different options that's going to be available here in Seoul, and I hope that expands a little more to the greater Seoul area and even in the countryside.
If I may add on, I think it's also because our generation is very conscious of animal rights, so cruelty-free options are always popular among our generation.
And Grace, if I may add, I think environmental change and climate changes is becoming too much of a risk at this point for us, our generation.
It's very evident
risk,
to us.
Very evident for us to risk any further. And as we know, more than 15% of the greenhouse gases is from livestock. The manures and having to grow them. So cutting back on meat is actually saving the environment in so many different ways.
Exactly. And we mentioned on NewsGen before that not having meat at least once a day could do wonders to the environment. And we asked our viewers if they've ever tried alternative meat and whether they think it tastes the same or as good as actual meat. Also, if they think it could be a complete substitute for meat one day. So here's what 3 of them had to say. Take a look at the screen to find out. Courtney Vegan said, I've tried Beyond Meat and Impossible Meat. Both are great and no cholesterol because it's made from plants. Joala Chia said, I have tried alternative meat in the form of a vegan burger, and it does taste like meat as it's juicy and flavorful. The barbecue sauce elevates the taste, but the price of alternative meat burgers and meals is way higher, so I'll stick to real meat in the meantime. Yathartha Shachia said, Impossible Meat is yum. I'm a vegetarian and enjoy Impossible burgers and quesadillas, but not frequently because I avoid processed food in general. All of our viewers mentioned great points, and we should also touch upon about the fact that it's quite pricey too.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that soon, but until then, we're going to include an expert who has been promoting making plant protein look and feel more like whole meat. Let's include him in our talks right after this. As we're seeing a growing demand among consumers to reduce their consumption of animal-based foods for environmental, ethical, and health reasons, there are also more researchers who are trying to use applied nanotechnology to make plant proteins better resemble animal meat. And that includes Dr. David Julian McClements. He's a distinguished professor of food science from the University of Massachusetts. Welcome, Dr. McClements.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great being here.
All right, so Professor McClements, how big is the alternative meat and even the clean meat industry in the States at the moment?
Yeah, so it's really increased enormously over the last few years. I think it's something like $7 billion or $8 billion for the plant-based food industry. And I think the cultivated meat, which is where you take a cell from an animal like a chicken or a cow and you grow it in a fermentation tank into meat. That's very few products in that area at the moment. Maybe Singapore is the main one, but I think that's projected to be like tens of billions in the near future if you can take a big slice of the meat market. So it's definitely the hottest topic in food science in America at the moment.
Professor, we definitely know the benefits of, choosing alternative meat over like actual meat. But do you think alternative meat can replace animal meat in every way? And that would include, obviously the most important, the taste, the texture, the nutrition benefits, and lastly, the most important, the affordable price.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the companies have done a really good job at making things like, nuggets and burgers and sausages, which are quite easy to make because they haven't got very sophisticated textures. But if you're trying to make like a plant-based whole chicken or a beef steak or a pork chop, which I think is going to be the next generation, it's much, much more complicated because these are incredibly complicated materials. And I think you really need to understand the science of how to assemble these plant-based ingredients into something that looks and feels and tastes like real meat. And to do it affordably is still a real challenge. And I think until we can reduce the cost, and especially at the moment when everybody's strapped for cash, I think not many people are going to eat these products. And I think the other big issue is health. I think we always assume that plant-based foods are healthier for you, but they're not necessarily if they're not designed correctly. And I think that's one of the key areas, I think, of the future that's going to be important.
Right. Professor, I'd like to ask the last question. I hear you and your team of researchers are trying to supplement the shortcomings of alternative meat. What are they at the moment, and what is being done to solve this matter?
Yeah, I think one of the main ones is, how do you make something that's like a chicken breast or a beef steak? And I think we're really trying to use things like soft matter physics and food architecture to try and create these products that have got the same texture and the same mouthfeel as real products. But I think a big emphasis is on nutrition. It's trying to fortify foods with all the nutrients that might be missing from a plant-based vegetarian or vegan diet. So actually one of my students is working in that area is a a Korean student who's just started, and he's doing a fantastic job in that area.
I
Awesome.
see. All right. Thank you so much, Professor McClements. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
All right, and based on our discussion today, how do you guys, or what would you guys like to see in terms of the alternative meat industry grow? Do you think you'll continue or try eating more of it?
I definitely would. I mean, I've already tried the bug, so I think I
think you made the whole list.
I think
Yeah.
I pretty much
Yeah.
made the whole list. But as Professor mentioned today, I think one of the most important thing to sort of, propel people to choose alternative meat is definitely the price.
For sure.
I mean, we saw it in the comments, and and you brought up a very, very great comment. But I think even now, having to choose organic, like vegan options and vegetarian option, actually you have to pay a little bit more than the normal option or the food that you get that includes meat. So I heard from a lot of my vegan friends who struggle with that too. So I think the best way to do it is to bring the prices down, and hopefully the technology and the research will catch up so that it becomes more public and available for people.
Exactly. That's a very good point. What about you, Nell?
I think it's interesting that the professor mentioned the texture and the taste and the nutrient aspect to it. I think from, back in the day, adults would say, eat lots of the meat. And if you're going to leave your food, eat the meat because of the nutritional value. And like Jessica mentioned, sometimes it's more expensive to eat vegan menus. So you kind of hesitate. Should I buy meat which has more nutritional value, but then, it's
That you've been
cheaper
programmed to
too?
believe.
So I really think, I'm really looking forward to how they're going to develop in the future with the nutrients and the good texture and the good flavors. And I'm actually really excited to see what it brings, because I feel like they're going to do something great with that.
I think your statement has a lot of weight because you've shown us that you've actually tried it.
Yeah, I mean, it's on its way. I think I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but for what it is right now, it's good. But I'm excited for the future.
Grace, would you be
Exactly.
joining us to the
I will
restaurant
definitely
outing?
be joining you guys, because throughout the whole Thursdays that we've been covering the environment, I think the main moral of the day is change daily habits one by one. And I think one way could be by changing the way you eat. And that would be including one meal, like making one meal vegan. You mentioned flexitarian.
Yes.
I'm trying to do that actually.
Are you?
And I'm very
How's that
happy
working out?
it's working out okay.
There was a hesitation.
There was a little hesitation there.
I like that the whole flexitarian thing is working, because I personally love meat. I'm sorry. I love meat, but having the idea that doing little bit can change,
Exactly.
I think that's what expands it in the future,
And as an individual, I will be taking baby steps, but as you guys both mentioned, I'm really looking forward to this alternative meat industry growing even quicker. So I have not only more tasty options, but affordable things that I can go reach out easily in hand. But in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainhong
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
and Elsa.
No problem.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.